Yes? Okay. All right. Let's see, we're going to call to order the Planning Commission meeting of January 8th, 2024. Happy New Year, everybody. And we will start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Please rise. Okay, Jackie, roll call.
Chair Kloetter.
Here.
Vice Chair Schwartz.
Here.
Commissioner Krapman.
Commissioner Krapman is absent this evening.
Commissioner Lee.
Here.
And Commissioner McMorris.
Here.
Okay, tonight's meeting is live streamed on Cable Channel 3 and on the city online platforms. Let's see, this is the time for public comment. And since we don't have anybody in the office or the audience, can we forego this? All right. I will say, though, if we do have any emails or anything, Jackie will be reading those into the record, and we will give them 3 minutes to be presented. Okay, on our consent calendar, we have the approval of the minutes. Everybody read them? Do we have any comments? No? Okay, do we have a move to approve? Second?
Yes, I second.
Jackie? We've got a second on the minutes.
Chair Kloetter.
Yes.
And Vice Chair Schwartz.
Yes.
Commissioner McMorris.
Yes.
And Commissioner Lee.
Yes.
Your vote is 4-0. Motion passed.
All right, public hearing procedures will be handled by Sam tonight.
Yes, thank you, Chair and members of the Planning Commission. My name is Samantha Tiwasar, Planning Manager with the Community Development Department. Copies of tonight's agenda are available on the city's website at www.sangabrielcity.com, and also here in the chambers, as well as speaker cards. There are two public hearing items before the Planning Commission this evening. And so with that, Chair, we are fortunate to have some technical support for the first public hearing item this evening. And with that, we are ready to move forward to item 3A.
Okay, and that's going to be you, Sam?
No, Chair. Presenting this evening will be Katie Cole with Furr & Pierce. Furr & Pierce is a consulting firm that is assisting the San Gabriel Valley Council of Governments, the SGV COG, assisting all the cities within the region with the item that will be presented this evening. It is very technical in nature, so again, we are very fortunate to have the assistance of Katie this evening.
Okay.
All right.
You're on.
Thank you. Good evening, commissioners. My name is Katie Cole. I'm a principal with Furr & Pierce, and I'm here tonight to talk to you a little bit about vehicle miles traveled and some updates that we need to do to your thresholds. So to get started, I am going to hopefully get the clicker to work. It doesn't seem to be advancing. You got it for me, okay. So tonight I'm gonna do just a brief refresher on Senate Bill 743, which relates to transportation impact analysis in CEQA, and it relates to vehicle miles traveled, or VMT. And I'm also going to give you a little bit of a reminder about the SGV COG VMT tool, which is a tool that helps city staff and developers calculate VMT. We're going to talk about some updates and the reasons for those, and then I'm going to show you our recommendations for your VMT thresholds. So as a reminder, the Senate Bill 743 was actually signed back in September of 2013, and the purpose of the law was it had three primary goals. The first one was to reduce GHG emissions, the second was to encourage infill development, and the third was to improve public health through increasing active transportation, so biking and walking and those modes that get us out moving. The outcome of this bill was that the California Office of Planning and Research did a lot of evaluation and provided some guidance documents on how individual cities should really implement SB 743. And in December of 2018, they came out with a technical advisory that provided information on how cities should really implement SB 743. At the same time, the Natural Resources Agency updated the CEQA guidelines, and the CEQA guidelines are basically the law. And the CEQA guidelines were updated to reflect Senate Bill 743, and specifically for transportation-related impacts for CEQA. There was a little bit of a kind of a phase-in period, but by July of 2020, they were fully implemented. They have been implemented since then, and you have been using them in the city. You've been using updated transportation impact analysis that complies with Senate Bill 743 since that time. Just as a refresher, really this is specific to CEQA, so the California Environmental Quality Act, the transportation impact assessment that's part of that. It eliminated vehicular level of service as a CEQA metric. Vehicular level of service is still analyzed for other purposes. It's just for a CEQA impact, for an environmental impact. The updated CEQA guidelines eliminated level of service, and the OPR technical advisory suggested vehicle miles traveled, or VMT, be the metric in its place. All VMT is, think of it as your odometer. It's how much and how far we're driving every day. As I mentioned, OPR provided methodology and some threshold guidance through their technical advisory. The outcome of this change is that it really does shift where significant impacts occur for transportation. Previously, when we were looking at level of service, we would oftentimes see an impact in like a city core or a place where congestion was really heavy. Now what we're seeing is impacts that are happening in kind of the more remote parts of cities. So anywhere where somebody has to drive really far to get to their job or to get to services, those are going to be places where impacts are most likely to show up. It also changed the way or the type of mitigation that was recommended. So previously, when we were looking at level of service and congestion, we might recommend things like traffic signals or widening the road to add additional lanes. Now we're really looking at ways to encourage people to drive less. It could look like adding, completing sidewalk gaps or adding bicycle facilities. In this photo, you're seeing kind of a transit stop enhancement as a mitigation. So that's just the overview, kind of the quick refresher on SB 743 and VMT. The other thing that OPR suggested was that there are certain criteria for projects that mean that they should be screened out from having to look at VMT. So any project that kind of meets these criteria are presumed to have a less than significant impact. These are not changing. So what we're recommending tonight is to kind of stay with the status quo, keep with what you have. But as a reminder, the types of projects that get screened out are things that are defined as locally serving retail. So those are retail uses that are less than 50,000 square feet. Typically, they're small services. It might be a pharmacy or things like that. Any project that generates less than 110 daily trips. Projects that are in low VMT areas, and so these are developed using a map, and we take your threshold and we put on the map any place in the city that's already meeting the threshold, and that creates your low VMT area. You will still have low VMT areas, but what we are recommending is a change to one of your thresholds, which means that the map might change a little bit. Transit priority area screening are for any project that's located in a transit priority area. That's not changing at all. And then finally, there are many types of transportation projects that still have to comply with CEQA, but that are not expected to create VMT impacts. So making improvements to bike lanes and sidewalks, or minor improvements to intersections, things like that. The other quick just overview reminder I wanted to provide was that the San Gabriel Valley Council of Governments did provide an area-wide tool to help city staff and developers analyze VMT. The tool is web-based, so you can go online. Anybody can really have access to it that wants to, but you go in and you can put in where your project is located, and it will calculate for you your VMT screening process. It will give you your project's VMT, and then it also helps you with mitigation. So if you do have an impact and you need to analyze how effective your mitigation is going to be, this tool will do that. The background of this tool, or what it's built upon, is the SCAG regional travel demand model. And so the reason that we're here today is that the SCAG regional travel demand model gets updated every few years, and that means that this tool and also your VMT maps will get updated every couple of years. So kind of, I previewed this, but what we are here to talk about today are some VMT evaluation updates. I mentioned the SCAG model, so the previous tool and your previous low VMT area screening maps were based on the last version of the SCAG model, which was from the 2016 SCAG Regional Transportation Plan. That has now been updated. There's a 2020 Regional Transportation Plan that now has new model data out, and so we've updated all the background numbers to reflect that new information. For CEQA, you need to be using the latest and the greatest, so you don't really have an option there. You always have to be updating to the latest information. Because of that change, we are recommending, we took a look at your thresholds and the numerical values of those thresholds, and based on that, we're recommending some changes to the basis for your thresholds. And then the other thing that is kind of a unique item that we have to update now that won't be all the time is that the travel demand management portion of the tool was based on an old version of the GHG handbook from CAPCOA that was done in 2010. That information was updated and published in 2021, so we have new information that we need to make an update for around the travel demand management component. Again, that's not something that we expect is going to get updated on a frequent basis, but it did get updated in the last couple of years. So to get into kind of just the meat of this, VMT thresholds are based on average VMT, either VMT per resident, VMT per employee, or VMT per service population, depending on what land use type you're evaluating. So for example, if you were analyzing a residential project, you would be looking at VMT per resident or VMT per capita. Currently, you use the San Gabriel Valley COG geography to establish what the average is. So we take all of the people in the model that are in the SGV COG area and we create an average. So you have choices as to what geographic area you're looking at to create that average. And so when we revised the numbers, we looked at the SGV COG area, we looked at the southwest region of SGV COG, which you fall within, and we looked at your city itself. And so to orient you to this table, what you're seeing is the just raw numbers out of the model called the baseline numbers for each of these different metrics. So VMT per SP is VMT per service population. That's the metric you use to analyze a mixed use project. All it is the VMT of the combined residents and employees, because a mixed use project would have both. VMT per capita is for residential projects. So VMT per resident is how many miles an average resident travels in a day. And then VMT per employee is you would use for more like office projects, and that's the average number of miles an employee travels in a day. The baseline numbers are just the numbers, the averages directly out of the model for each of those geographic areas. Your threshold is 15% below that average. Okay? And currently, for all of these metrics, you're using the SGV cog geography to set your average. And what we're suggesting is that you keep that the same for both the VMT per service population and the VMT per capita. We recommend that you just leave that the same. But we are recommending that for employment, you look at VMT per employee for the Southwest region. And the reason for that is that we are trying to maintain as many of the low VMT areas as possible and set the most achievable VMT standard. So to give you what that looks like in terms of maps, the blue areas on these maps represent places in the city that already meet the 15% below geographic average. And in this case, it's the SGV cog average. Anywhere in yellow is 0 to 15%. Typically, when we see something that's in yellow on this map, we expect that these projects can likely do mitigation and probably get themselves to a less than significant level. If we see red on the map, that means it's higher than the average. And while mitigation would still be necessary for those projects, it might be harder for them to kind of get all the way to 15% below. But this is the map for VMT per service population. This is VMT per capita, so VMT per resident. So you do see that there are some red areas on this map, meaning that if you had a residential project that didn't meet a different screening criteria that was located in one of these red areas, it would likely have a difficult time getting all the way to less than significant. If it's in the yellow area, again, they would use the tool and figure out what mitigation measures they could apply. And again, the 15% below is the same as what it was before. Both of these two metrics are using the same geography as you were using before. The one that we're suggesting that you change is VMT per employee. So based on your current, the current way that you analyze this, you look at 15% below the SGV cog geographic area. That's what you see there in the map that says current. What we are recommending is the map that shows recommended, and that would be using the Southwest area sub-regional average instead of the whole SGV cog area. So just to kind of, that's all of the technical details. I can definitely answer additional questions, but to kind of tell you what's happening with this project and next steps, this information for any city that's in the SGV cog area that wants to kind of revisit their thresholds, they're doing that in this January and February timeline. We're working in the meantime on kind of updating the tool and releasing a beta version in early spring. As we're doing that, we'll be providing the updated guidelines for any city that needs updated guidelines in April, and then kind of doing the full release with a completely updated tool in the May or June timeframe. And I believe that concludes my presentation, but I am definitely available to answer any questions.
Okay, well, thank you. Commissioners, anybody want to jump in on this? John?
Yeah, I don't think my question really has anything to do with the you know, what we're voting on, but I just for my own clarity, when they calculate the VMT in an area, is it based on actual, you know, roads from one point to another, or is it just based on how the crow flies? In other words, a straight line from one point to another, which...
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. So this is all done using a regional travel demand model, which is a very fancy, complicated tool that has all of our roads in it, and it simulates all of our travel behavior, and it is calculating it based on driver distance on the roads. But it's a simulated population, so it's not like anybody's tracking you or me and understanding exactly how far we individually travel. They basically look at household travel surveys, and a lot of demographic information, and then traffic volumes that are counted, and try to simulate the population's behavior.
I see. My last question was just, I know you had mentioned why they converted to, the VMT model over LOS. I'm just wondering, part of the rationale was that it was, correct me if I'm wrong, supposed to encourage more travel through means other than vehicles. Is that something that they actually have data on that VMT has produced, or is it just kind of assumptions or wishful thinking that this model, cities will convert to, we'll start putting in bike lanes and having more bus routes or whatnot?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely data to show the change in people's travel choices over time. If your question is, have we changed? It's too early to tell. I will say that the state of California has had goals around reducing GHG and promoting active transportation for many years. And I mean, you and I, we all travel the way that we travel because of a reason, right? Like, I have kids that I need to get to soccer practice and school, and I oftentimes can't make those trips by my bike or by transit. And so I think it's going to be baby steps for us to get to kind of the outcome where we do have options, like real options where you could pick between driving your car or taking your bike. But this was the state's attempt to kind of incrementally push that forward. But there's absolutely data to show how we've changed. We honestly have not changed much. The pandemic did not help things for transit for sure. But yeah, it's a work in progress, I guess.
Okay, thank you. Those are all my questions.
That brings up a point. Is time of day taken into consideration at all? Because let me just explain. We get these developments that come before us, and if it's on Valley Boulevard or something, and you're in an intersection, and people are backed up for minutes and minutes, and trying to get through the city. But that's not all day. So how do you factor that in?
Yeah, so vehicle miles traveled is just a daily metric. It doesn't really care when those miles are traveled, whether it's at a time when there's no congestion or at a time when there is congestion. One of the reasons why we still look at level of service for projects is that is time of day related. So typically that is evaluated during the morning commute and the afternoon commute, or if it's a special land use that maybe is nearby a school, you might pick a different, kind of the most congested time of the day. But this metric for vehicle miles traveled is really does not consider time of day at all.
It's an apple and an orange.
They're just two completely different metrics, yeah.
Okay. And they're used for different things.
That's right.
Yeah, okay, good. I got to hand it to you. The acronyms in this thing were just amazing. I don't know how you keep that all straight. But
I'm sorry. I try not to, when I'm actually speaking, I try not to use too many. So if there was any that I went through too quickly, let me know.
reading through it, I needed a table of contents or something.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
We like our acronyms in the transportation world.
Well, thank you for keeping that straight. Anybody else?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for coming here and explaining it to us. Appreciate that. I have just a quick clarifications on the baseline threshold that the tool has. You quickly explained it to our fellow commissioners that it was part of this fancy formulas, right? Is it kind of like based on the surveys that you guys usually conduct and then put it all together, or how does that work?
Yeah, so SGV-COG has a regional travel demand model, which it's effectively a computer program that has all of our roads, all of our traffic volumes, and then they conduct household travel surveys. So both the census data, but they also conduct separate household travel surveys of residents in our region. And all of that information is distilled into this complex computer program that simulates how we travel. And that computer program is used to produce metrics like vehicle miles traveled, but it's also used to forecast how much just traffic volume might be on a certain roadway in the future. So the travel model is calibrated to a base year. So in this case, it's actually 2016 for the 2020 RTP, just to be really confusing because data is always a couple of years old. But it's calibrated to a certain kind of existing conditions year. And then we use the tool, we use the travel demand model to look into the future and try to predict, what roads are gonna get really over capacity, if vehicle miles traveled is going down, things like that. But they definitely use surveying and traffic counts that are done on the roads are part of that tool as well.
Awesome, thank you. Just a follow-up. So when we I was reading through this presentations, and then the mitigation is for the area-wide, right? For like a VMT mitigation measures. So what are the typical mitigations that will be used, to kind
Yeah.
of solve the problems?
So for an individual project, depending on the project type, so let's just take a residential project as an example. Oftentimes, if they have a VMT impact, so what that means is that they're situated in a place that people kind of have to drive far to get to their jobs or to services. And so the types of improvements that they would make is to really figure out a way to encourage people to own bikes or to use transit. So they might offer transit subsidies, they might put in extra bike storage on the site, they might improve bike facilities nearby their project. So they might, help the city, construct a bike lane or close a sidewalk gap. All of these types of mitigations, though, are kind of back to the comment I made earlier, are just little incremental pieces of what is a bigger solution to get us to drive less, right? Like we can't drive less unless you kind of have all of that infrastructure in place, and no one single little project is going to be able to do that on their own. So, but the types of mitigation they would do are all of those things I just kind of mentioned. If they're an employment project, they have some more options in their toolbox. They could, again, incentivize taking transit, so offer subsidies. They could put together a carpool program, a van pool program, different things like that.
Thank you. So it is not kind of like expanding the intersection, but it is more like incentives providing to people who willing to use like alternative modes of transportation, right?
That's right, yeah. So level of service, though, which is, again, still something that is analyzed, just not part of CEQA, not part of the environmental impact, does result in improvements like traffic signals or adding turn lanes or things, widening a road a little bit, things like that. But for VMT, the simple formula for VMT is just the number of trips you drive multiplied by their distance, which means that the mitigation either has to reduce the number of trips that we make, or it has to decrease the distance that we drive. So the mitigation is all programs around those two things, and really we have the most control in the number of trips that we make. And so we're trying to reduce the number of trips you make by your car by maybe substituting one of those by a bike or by a walking trip or by transit. And so it's not easy. I think what we've learned over the last couple of years with this being implemented is that those types of improvements are really great quality of life type improvements. Adding bike lanes and sidewalks and those types of improvements are great. They add value to our community, but it doesn't necessarily incentivize us enough to then change our mode on a frequent basis, just because, like I said, we all have reasons why we travel the way we do, and it's oftentimes really difficult to change because it's going to take more time or be more inconvenient, or, I can't haul my Costco items on my bike. There's lots of reasons why we choose the way we travel, but we also are just in a we're car-centric culture, in our state, in our country, and so changing that, making that shift is difficult.
Okay, just one last question. So, when I was reading through it, one thing that popped out and attract my attention is the type of the improvement that is like school is in the category of like low VMT. Why is that? Because
So
like when you think about it, like when you drop off, pick up, you know, like that produce or that had a like a lot of impact on the communities or nearby intersections or on the roadways, right? So, but why is that in the low category?
Yeah, it's a good question. So the impact is typically congestion-based right around the school during pickup and drop-off time. And VMT is more about how far away are people going to drop their kids off or pick them up. And so the category that schools, public schools, are listed in is locally serving. So it's like a locally serving retail or locally serving public facility. This does get a little bit tricky depending on what school districts allow, but in general, people have a neighborhood school that they're going to, and when you put in a new elementary school or a new school, the expectation is that most of those students are going to be coming from the local area, meaning that they're going to have low VMT. They're not going to have to go very far. So even if the congestion, because people are driving their cars, is a lot, they didn't have to drive that far to get to the school, and that's why it's in that category. But it's very true that schools have, during those very specific times right around start and end of school, there is a lot of congestion and chaos that happens for that, half an hour period. And that's usually, that type of situation is typically addressed outside of CEQA. It's done more through just their, if you were processing a school project, it would be done more through just their entitlement process and conditions of approval on how they deal with that congestion.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to save some questions for staff later.
Jerry, anything?
Yeah. When you go through CEQA prior to this, and you deal with level of service, it's easy to evaluate that streets need to be widened or whatever for a project. With VMT, are there going to be the similar kinds of evaluations for potential street impacts on a project?
So VMT is definitely not individual street-based. It's more how much are we traveling regardless of which streets we're on. There is no, so CEQA itself, actually in the guideline, the CEQA guidelines, which is the law, specifically eliminated level of service as the criteria for analyzing environmentally based impacts. But the city still does look at level of service and require those types of congestion-related improvements outside of the, the CEQA purview. But yeah, your observation is correct, that CEQA is not, you're not going to figure out that you need to widen a certain road or put in a traffic signal now in the CEQA process.
Right, okay, thank you.
Okay. Did we have any public comment come in on this one? They got bogged down in the alphabet soup, too. Okay, so you had staff comments? Now's the time.
Now it's the time. Okay. Just trying to understand. We've been adopting this VMT past a few years, I believe, right? So I just want to try to understand what is the impact that San Gabriel resident has since we adopted, right? So what kind of like improvement that we have in our community that is based on adoptions of this? Do you have any example?
Yes, Chair, and members of the Planning Commission, not in terms of the VMT. So what is important about what's being presented this evening is, again, being reminded that when evaluating projects under CEQA, that now the metrics being utilized is the vehicle miles traveled versus the level of service, which the public may be familiar with in terms of A through F and how long a vehicle would have to wait at an intersection, and that's what determines the impacts. The commission has probably seen with some of the mitigated negative declarations that have come through for some of the mixed-use project would be the analysis, the vehicle miles travel analysis that sometime come with the project that is presented to the commission. As mentioned by Katie, what the commission may also see would be conditions of approval provided by the Public Works Department. So the Public Works Department still evaluates level of service at certain intersection, and as conditions of approval, the Planning Commission may still see the sidewalk improvements, the right turn lanes, the dedication of right-of-way in order to add in these improvements. So staff wouldn't say that improvements have been sacrificed because of the change in the metrics, that right-of-way street improvements are still being made as conditions of projects. And so specifically related to vehicle miles travel and whether or not infrastructure has been designed into projects based off of this metric, not specifically. But also, on the other hand, the commission has been seeing the other improvements through conditions of approval.
Okay, so we don't actually have a specific example. What I'm trying to understand is, like, since we adopted this, like, do we put in something specifically like what Katie was talking about, you know, like incentive to the employees, or like a bus stop improvements, or like nearby sidewalk improvements or something like that? Is that something that we can consider moving forward, or we had an example, proven example before, you know?
Not in San Gabriel. If I can tag on to what Katie can add on to this. Katie had mentioned mitigation measures such as bike lanes, such as I don't know what else. The ride-share programs. I don't believe projects have triggered mitigations to that extent, but maybe Katie can provide some examples
I
from other
think-
cities.
Yeah, I think most of the projects that you've processed over the last couple of years have been screened out from VMT, so they haven't had a VMT impact. So the improvements that you're seeing are more on the public works side, so the right turn lanes, left turn lanes, signals, things like that. But I can tell you that there are projects around the region and around the state that have had to implement those types of measures. So I can give you an example. I'm actually based in San Diego, so I do a lot of work in San Diego, but we had a residential multifamily project that their mitigation measure was to provide a transit subsidy, and it was a very specific subsidy, and they had to come up with a whole plan about how they were going to offer that subsidy to their residents. And so there was there's basically like an instruction guide that the HOA has to implement that is all part of the conditions of approval of that project. So that's one example. I've also seen portions of bike lane constructed and sidewalk gaps filled. So just a number of things like that. But I think it's just in the city of San Gabriel, you just haven't had any projects with an impact that have needed to do that mitigation. So you're still getting the other types of improvements that are more level of service based.
Practically speaking, in a CEQA context for VMT, it's going to take a pretty significant size project to trigger those thresholds to require those types of mitigation. And given the lack of land and an open space for development here, you're unlikely to probably see those under the CEQA context.
Or even the codes. We don't build that big of a building.
Right. So it may be rare that you see those in this context. The important distinction here is that we're You still have some of your traffic impact controls through your general plan and your level of service and your public works requirements and your conditions of approval. But from a CEQA context, we're limited now to only this VMT, and before us now is we're adopting basically the formula that we're going to use to establish that VMT. Because that can vary a little bit too, but we're kind of trusting in the studies and the analyses and the recommendations of staff, which tool works best for San Gabriel.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for everyone jumping in and explaining, because like it is good for me to understand as well as whoever tuned in to listen to it. You know, it is a complicated matter, you know, so it would be best for the community to understand completely. Just one last one. Is there any like foreseeable impact on like city budgets because of we are switching over or we are adopting or modifying, you know, to the new formula?
No, no changes.
Thank you.
It's easier for the developers, though. It's cheaper for them. The CEQA analysis becomes a little simpler.
Okay.
It gives them more tools, too.
Yes, and the tools are very easy. They're formulaic. They're plug and play. So that part of the analysis becomes simpler than it did when people were evaluating traffic impacts and level of service in the CEQA model.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you.
Very good, okay. So where are we here? If nobody has any more comments, I think I will entertain a motion. Or actually, I'll move that we adopt and attach the attached resolution, which is draft resolution number 24-01, recommending that the City Council find the action is exempt from CEQA and adopt the proposed updated thresholds of significance. That's our motion. Do we have a second?
I second that.
Okay, thank you, Sean.
Commissioner McMorris,
Yes.
Commissioner Lee,
Aye.
Chair Klowitter,
Yes,
and Vice Chair Schwartz.
Yes.
Okay, the vote is 4-0, motion carried.
very good. Katie, thank you for all your work and for coming in on a Monday evening.
You bet.
All right.
Thank you for listening to my acronyms.
Appreciate it. Okay, next item is item B, citywide, which is another zone text amendment, number ZTA 23-004. And Sam, I think you're going to take the lead on this one because you're the only one here.
That's right. Chairman and members of the Planning Commission. Item 3B is a zone text amendment. And this zone text amendment is in response to Senate Bill 1186, the Medicinal Cannabis Patients' Right to Access Act. And this act went into effect the first of this month of this year. And what this bill does is it precludes cities and counties from adopting and enforcing regulations that prohibit or have the effect of prohibiting the retail of medicinal cannabis by delivery. The Senate Bill 1186, it does allow cities and counties, however, to adopt and to enforce regulations. So again, cannot prohibit, but the city can adopt regulations through zoning requirements, security and public health and safety requirements, licensing, and also imposing taxes. And so currently, it's very simple for the city of San Gabriel. Cannabis uses are prohibited throughout the zones. And one of the amendments this evening would be to permit cannabis delivery with the conditional use permit in the M1 light manufacturing zone. The amendments have been provided to the Planning Commission. This is a simple summary of the change, but also in addition to this, are definitions that have been added to the existing cannabis regulations, as well as other changes that will come along with this introduction to allowing the use subject to a conditional use permit. So the proposed amendments, again, it includes allowing the use through a conditional use permit. And again, this is delivery only. It's not intended to introduce storefront operations, and there are no walk-in customers. So essentially, this is to allow a use to basically open an administrative type use and to allow for delivery only. The regulations, the proposed regulations this evening also establishes distance requirements, again, 600 feet away from any schools, parks, daycares, youth centers, as well as not being within 1,000 feet of each other in uses. The M zone, the light manufacturing zone in the city of San Gabriel is basically limited to around the Augustino area, around where the train track is located. So the area where the use is being proposed is not a wide area within the city. Also, there's language in the proposed code that states that once there are any changes, updates, sunsets to this law, then the city, whatever is being introduced at this time would follow what the state does, and with that we can come back with amendments if that's the case. And in addition to the conditional use permit requirement, which will come before the Planning Commission, there's also an administrative retailer permit procedure that will follow. It will include an additional application. It will go before a group that is likely to consist of the city manager, the police department, the fire department. So there is a follow-up process to the conditional use permit process. And as part of that is to make sure that there are operation standards to these locations as well. And so with that, Chairman, the recommendation this evening before the Planning Commission of San Gabriel is to recommend approval to the City Council of the proposed zone text amendment ZTA 23-004 to the City Council, and this is amending the existing cannabis chapter to introduce the delivery-only use. And if approved by the commission, next step would be to go before the city council for their review of these amendments. And this concludes staff's presentation.
Okay, so this is just a minor change to the original ordinance that we adopted, I'm going to say 6 or 7 years ago? 2016?
It's something to that effect, yes.
Because I believe at that time it was pretty much a complete ban. Now, the other thing that I don't think you touched on here was the cultivation requirements for personal use, which, correct me if I'm wrong, have not changed.
Correct.
Okay, but they are mentioned in the report. Okay. Any comments, commissioners? Or do we have any public?
No, Chair, we didn't receive any.
I have a question.
Yeah, Jerry.
It appears when I read the entire thing that if someone got a conditional use permit, that they have to renew it every year. Is that right? That's what it looked like.
The license, yes, the license itself, not the conditional use permit.
There's a requirement for.
There's both. You need a license and a CUP.
So actually, it's kind of like a massage parlor, where you have the, okay.
But the license
Very
is
similar model.
annually renewed, is that right?
Say it again?
The license is annually renewed.
Correct.
Right, but not the CUP.
CUP would remain in effect unless it comes back before this commission for some revocation hearing.
Right, okay. Thank you.
Sean, anything?
Just clarify, this is, we have to do this, right? Because the state law says we can't not just say, well, you can't.
We have to do something. The details in here are at our discretion. It says we can't foreclose, completely ban it. But the decisions of what zones to put it in, what distance from other sensitive uses, those are all in our discretion. The health and safety requirements, for example, if we're requiring security cameras or security guards or fencing or things of that nature, that's all within our discretion, but we just can't zone it out.
Yeah, okay, that clarifies that. And I'm personally, I'm not against it. It's just, it's medical, it's medicinal, and it's just for delivery. But yeah, I wasn't clear on, I thought it was required by state law, but I see also too, we have discretion, so, all right.
Some discretion.
Some,
That first slide that Sam showed you had the limitations on that showed you what the state said you can't do, but everything else is wide open.
yeah, there was some, I was looking at there's some specific language in one of the reports that says pretty vague on what they said on some stuff. So I mean, that might have been by design, but it's, yeah, I saw that.
Well, yeah, just so you know the history on this, it's pretty much coming from the city. We're the ones who were putting the restrictions on it. So I think we've been fine over the last, 7 years? So, anyway.
Just a quick clarification, like Sean has. Current status in our city is total ban, right? Total ban on usage of the right. So if we adopt this, we are going to be allowing.
There's not a total ban now.
No, okay.
No. That's what I was saying, is that back in 2016, when we did the first resolution, there was allowing personal cultivation, which I don't think you can say no to that. So that's one of those things where yes, there is some room, or yes, we had approved some of these things, but we disapproved the retail environments, okay? So this being in an M1 zone is strictly takeout. It's and delivery. This is not a retail situation, and that's what we haven't had in the past either. So we're just continuing with that. I don't know if that helps. I didn't really verbalize that very well.
Practically speaking, it's fairly limited and yet to be seen how likely it is anybody will open it, but it's only going to allow this one very limited thing, which is a structure or building that's used for the distribution through delivery of strictly medicinal marijuana to strictly medicinal marijuana patients. So people can't come in and out, they can't buy stuff there, they can't warehouse recreational marijuana, all they can do is this very limited thing. And given the growth of recreational marijuana and the availability of that and the laws regarding delivery of that, I think it's one of these laws that we're not likely to see many, if any, applicants for, just because it's very narrow, and staff has crafted the rules for that very narrowly as well. So it's just for that one little use that we're creating an exception.
For delivery only, right? So that delivery only is that by state law, we need to allow that, correct?
Correct.
Which requires us to change our current requirements. That's what we're.
Right. And when we're making sure that the use is safe and being done in a location and in a manner that we can control it and limit it and make sure that it's safe.
Okay, so that leads me to a couple of questions to follow up. Do we have like study done to other like neighboring jurisdictions where they have this already in place? Have we had any kind of like lesson learned from that? Do we have a study, something like that, or like a research done?
I think the lesson learned is to keep the restrictions from retail and growing and some of those things, commercial growing.
Okay, okay.
Yep.
And my next question is, what is a foreseeable or projection socioeconomic impacts and what kind of benefits coming out of from this business allowing in San Gabriel, like tax or something like that.
Or if staff had to take a guess, it would likely be the taxing. It's difficult to know. It's not something that staff has surveyed if it's a popular use in other cities. The idea and staff's understanding of the Senate bill is to allow for this type of use to be open, possibly to just provide the medicinal need to the patients that would need it. But really, aside from the taxes that would come from that, it would only be a guess on staff's part at this point.
And the benefit to the community, you know, without having to go outside of the city. It's always nice to spend your money in the city.
And that was certainly legislature's intent, was to give local patients access to this product. But I don't have any clients where I have seen anybody try to open one of these. And keep in mind too that this bill was drafted 3 years ago. This part of the bill just became effective on January 1st. And the growth of recreational marijuana in a lot of jurisdictions has made that more the profit center. So I don't really know surrounding communities what you have, but if you have recreational marijuana available in your surrounding communities, you're not likely to see this develop.
Yeah, this is about 10 years behind its time, or
Yeah.
20.
And the laws currently allow for recreational facilities out of your jurisdiction to deliver into your jurisdiction. So you already have delivery right now.
That was actually approved with the original resolution. The
Yeah, 'cause
ability to have it
You
delivered
can't
in
block
the
this,
city.
yeah, you can't
Yeah.
keep them off the streets, but, yeah, so there's a lot here, but there's also probably not much here.
Okay. Any other comments?
A quick follow-up, Chair.
Okay.
My next question is, what is going to be the impact on our fellow non-house community? Like, would they be able to order on their phone and then get delivered to their site?
That's,
You can do that now. For recreational, regular cannabis.
No.
that's
If
good.
we pass this, right? If we pass this,
If you pass this and a business came in and decided they were going to create a location in the city and they got the license and they went through all of that, then patients in San Gabriel could presumably have maybe quicker access if that actually developed.
doesn't matter they are on the streets and house or, like a order from a household?
There are limits to where they can deliver, correct? Yes, so that's some of the controls we were talking about, that delivery can't be to, for example, they can't deliver from or to another dispensary. I remember that one offhand. Probably similar regulations regarding other types of sensitive uses maybe, but those are the types of things we can control and say, hey, we don't want you delivering to schools, or you can't deliver to other facilities.
Within 600 feet of a school. Yeah, that's all written into the.
My next question might be a legal question. So what if we don't pass this? What's going to happen?
Well, if these changes aren't made and the status quo is kept, the ban is kept, then the city would be open and subject to a lawsuit by anybody who wanted to open one up. Whether they actually were going to or not, they could claim that they want to, and we would be subject to that lawsuit, which we would inevitably lose, and would probably cost us a lot of money and resources.
So that means that from the legal perspective, it is recommended to pass this because we have
Yes.
more restrictions or control over what can be done in our city.
I strongly advise that the city adopt something that allows for medicinal cannabis delivery. The details of that are really what I would defer to staff and this commission to help develop and craft, for example, those locations, those buffer zones, those restrictions on how it's operated. Those are certainly well within the city's discretion. But yes, my legal advice is that we need to adopt something to allow this limited use in the city.
I will say that the city has done a good job of putting some of those restrictions in.
And we are not alone in doing this at this time. There are I have dozens of cities that are going through this
It's a bit of a scramble,
this
right?
very January scramble right now and are faced with these decisions.
No further, Chair.
Okay. Anybody else? Do we have a motion?
I move we approve.
Okay, I'll second that. Jackie?
Chair Cluitter,
Yes.
Vice Chair Schwartz,
Yes.
Commissioner Lee,
I'm not ready to vote yes. Because of that, I'm saying no.
abstain or no?
I'm sorry?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. Abstain or no?
No.
Okay. And Commissioner McMorris?
Yes.
Okay, the vote is 3 yes, 1 no. Motion passed.
Okay. Very good. Let's see, do we have any city items, Sam?
No comments, Chair.
Okay. Commissioners, any good stuff? Nope, me either. Let's go watch the end of the football game. Okay, so we're going to adjourn this meeting, and we'll be getting together again on February 12th. And